What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be working on extending my current deck. Now my current deck is roughly 10 by 20 and I built that about 2 years ago. But this week we're going to work on extending it with another section that's going to be roughly 20 by 18. So without further ado, let's jump in and let's get this project started. And basically what I did was I started off with a diagram that I drew up just to give me a general guideline to follow when I'm building my deck. So I created my ledger board, I created my joists, I created my 8 posts in my post beams. So I basically just wanted to create a visual for me to follow when I'm putting this all together. So I always recommend, if you can, draw up a rough diagram of what you think you're going to build, just so you have something to follow as you're going along. Okay, so here's my deck here. Never mind the look of it. I actually stained it 2 years ago, and then not too long ago, I went ahead and pressure washed the stain off because I plan on painting it a different color. But before I paint it, I want to do the new deck, which is going to cover this whole area right here. So basically what I'm doing right now is marking out where my support posts are going to go. Now, because this deck is going to be a lot deeper at roughly 18 foot, where that's only 10 foot, I'm going to do 2 rows of support posts. So my goal is to do 4 support posts in the front and 4 support posts pretty much through the middle. Now, as you see some of these red markings on the ground, that's just me playing around with a few measurements to figure out where is the best place to put my support posts. So that's my goal. So what I'm doing is I'm just cleaning out this area for now. I'm figuring out now where I'm going to put my posts, and then I'm going to go ahead and start digging the holes, and then we're going to put the posts in the ground with some cement. Now again, I'm no professional carpenter or no professional engineer, but what I'm trying to do is give my deck plenty of support to hold the weight of the deck. So let me go ahead, take a few more measurements, get things lined up, and we're going to start digging these holes. Okay, so we went ahead and we got the first 2 holes drilled, and it worked out pretty good. Now keep in mind, this auger bit here is only about 2.5 feet deep if you take the hole all the way to the top of the bit. But for just drilling basic deck posts, that's perfectly fine for me. Now it's already been running, so it's warmed up, so now we just have to start it. Okay, we're back. So I got all the holes dug using the auger over here. It actually worked out pretty good. Now that's a 32-inch auger, so you're not going to get a typical 3 or 4 feet deep hole. But still, for my application here, 32 inches deep on a hole is perfectly fine for what I'm trying to do, because my deck is only about 2 feet off the ground anyways. So I'm happy with that depth. So I got all 4 holes dug. I got the 4 across the front and the 4 across the middle here. Then I just took some rubberized spray that I had, which is this stuff right here. Okay, this rubberized aerosol coating stuff. I had a couple cans of these laying around, so I just went ahead and sprayed the top couple feet of them, because that is what's going to go in the hole. And when I add the concrete and the moisture, that little bit of rubber coating will help protect the 4x4 posts. Now, you don't necessarily have to do that, but if you want to, it's just another precaution to make your posts last a little bit longer. So the next thing I need to do is start getting my bucket and concrete out, and we're going to start putting the posts in the ground. So I want to try to get all 4 in the front done today, because I don't have enough wood at this moment to brace everything in position, because I had to order all of my lumber from the local lumber yard, and all of my deck framing is going to be treated 2x10 by 20. So I couldn't fit the 20-foot boards in any of my trucks, so I ended up having to have them deliver it. So they're going to come next week and deliver it, which is why I don't have the lumber here to use. So I grabbed some scraps out of my basement, and I'm just going to put the 4x4 posts in the front tonight. I'm going to go ahead and put the concrete in the holes, and I'm going to go ahead and use some of this wood to help brace it and keep it in position so everything's lined up. And then probably tomorrow or the next day, I'll take my braces off, The concrete should be dry, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the back 4 posts. And then probably over the weekend, I'm going to work on tearing off the bottom 2 or 3 layers of siding here. And then I'm going to get my ledger board waterproof tape and tape that all up. And then when my lumber comes in next week, then we're going to start working on getting all the framing figured out. So for now, let me just keep working on the posts, and we'll be back here shortly. Okay, so I got the first post over here in the ground, cemented. It's all level and good to go. So typically what I do is I want to get my post square to the ground, but I also want to get it square to the original post over there. So I took a 2x4 and I have it screwed into the first post. Then what I want to do is get this post here square to the ground, and then I'll use my board here to get it square to the first post, and then we'll be good. So typically what I do is I'll just take my level here, and as you can see here, it's not too bad this way. So I need to kind of shift it back towards the garage a little bit. Okay, so just to get it level like that. So to do that, what I'll do is I'll just throw a couple bigger stones like this, or just some gravel, whatever you have laying around. I have some big stones around my pool over there, and I have gravel here. So just drop a couple down into that cavity, and then just shimmy your board into position, just like so. And then after I do that, I'm going to go ahead and pour some concrete in the hole. Then we're going to go ahead and screw this screw here, put the board on, and that'll keep it level to the first post so that it's not accidentally moving out of the way. So let me keep doing that, and we'll be right back. Okay, so it's the next day, and all of the concrete at each post is pretty much dry now. So I'm going to go ahead and take some of my bracing boards off, which I just had up to keep everything kind of nice and flush and straight. Now that everything's dry, I'll take my braces back down, and then we're going to start working on putting the 4 posts across the back. So again, the hardest part of doing this is getting it all lined up perfectly. But again, if you just take a little bit of time and measure everything out, measure the length of each hole, and then maybe use a measuring point of reference from, like, say, your wall out. And by doing it that way, it'll help keep everything pretty much lined up. So again, I'm going to go back through, measure everything out one more time to make sure all of my holes are pretty much center. Then we're going to go ahead and start mixing up some concrete again, and we're going to get our posts in the ground, get those cemented in, get these braces off of here, put the braces on over here, and then we'll let that dry for a day or so. So we'll be back in a minute. Okay, so we're all done with the posts. I got all of the braces taken off, and I backfilled with some dirt and gravel. So all 8 posts are now done and cemented in the ground and nice and sturdy. But today what we're going to work on is preparing for our ledger board. So what I need to do is take the bottom layer of siding off the house. Now, if you really just don't plan on ever reusing it, you could just go ahead and take a utility knife or whatever you want to do and cut that right off. Now, what I usually recommend is try to get a pry bar or maybe a hammer or something and try to wedge up under the bottom and get that channel out that actually holds the siding in place. Pop that out, and that way you could keep this siding as a backup piece in case you ever happen to damage siding somewhere else in your home. You still have some good quality siding that you could use to repair it. So I'm just going to go ahead and use a small pry bar like this and a hammer, and we're going to try to get that bottom piece of siding off. Now, I might even have to cut a little bit of the 3rd row right here a little bit because I need to match it up with my deck over there. So I'm going to work on doing that. Once we have that done, we'll clean it up a little bit, and then we'll start using our flashing tape. Now, the flashing tape that I'm going to be using is this stuff right here. It's from a company called Deckwise. It's basically a waterproof ledging board flashing tape. This particular roll here is 12 inches high by 25 feet long. And when I ordered this, I ended up ordering 2 rolls of it. I have another roll in the garage. That way I can have a continuous seam going all the way across the bottom piece there. So I found that using this Deckwise tape here works fantastic. I used it on my other deck ledger board over here, so I'm going to reuse it again on this deck extension. And if you're interested in this particular product here, because it's hard to find in a store, I'll put a link in the description of this video where you can find some for yourself. So let me start working on this, and we'll be right back. Okay, so this is what I mean. You're just going to take a pry bar or your fingers, if you can actually get up under here, and just pull out away from the home, because depending on the product that was used on your siding, on my house it was this metal flashing here that just has a lip at the bottom, that the bottom loop of the siding here, it folds up underneath of it, and that's what holds your bottom row of siding on your house. So all you got to do is unloop that, and then once you come up underneath, just lift up your house wrap, and you can see right here there's staples holding it in place. So just go ahead and use your hammer or your pry bar or maybe a screwdriver, pull out all of those staples and pop that off. And then the next row of siding that's above that, just go ahead and stick your fingers under there and kind of like wedge it off of this lip right here, okay? And then lift up, and then you can see right here, there's staples holding that piece of siding on. So you're just basically gonna be removing some of the staples. That way you can take off your siding. Now this piece right here, because on the siding on my house, it's a 4.5 inch double stack. So what I need to do then is I'll have to take a utility knife and cut this bottom 4-inch piece off. So let me keep working on this and we'll be right back. Okay, so we got a lot of the siding and aluminum butt lock pieces here ripped off the wall. So I have all that ripped off right now. I left that little piece there because I'm gonna box in around that. As far as finishing off the bottom row of your siding, now if you happen to have the aluminum butt lock like I do here, that's not gonna help me for finishing that bottom piece right there because that doesn't have a channel for the siding here to fall inside. That's actually meant for the bottom row to loop up under. So I can't reuse that metal. But if this happens to be the situation you find yourself in and you don't have the bottom butt lock piece for your bottom piece of siding to lock into, what you could do is just take an old piece of scrap vinyl siding, cut it in half, flip it upside down and mount it behind the siding like I did here. Okay. I just took a piece of siding there, cut it in half, flipped it upside down because it already has that loop right here that I can go ahead and tuck this bottom piece of siding in just like this. Just like that. And it falls right in place with a nice bottom butt lock seam there, and you didn't have to go buy anything special. All we're doing is reusing some of the siding that we used as scraps that we took off. We're cutting it in half, flipping it upside down, mounting it backwards. That way that channel here creates a really nice butt lock seam for the bottom of your siding. So let me keep finishing this up and we'll be right back. Okay, so we got all of the flashing done. And now it holds my bottom piece from lifting up. Everything's mounted in, boxed in real good. So now I'm ready to start applying my ledger board waterproof tape. Very simple. All we got to do is peel the back off and stick it on all the way across. So let me start working on that and we'll be right back. Okay, so we're all done. We got all of the waterproof ledger board tape put up. So now we're completely trimmed up, ready to rock and roll. So tomorrow the lumber is being delivered, so I'll be back in a flash. Okay, so my framing joists have showed up. So we have a whole stack of 2x10 by 20, which is a treated lumber there. And I have my saw set up over there. I have my straps over here. So we have some joist hangers right here. And then we have some hurricane straps over there. And then over here, I have some 3/8 by 5 inch lag bolts here. Okay, which is what I'll be using to attach the ledger board to the house. And that's why I have this socket here, which is just a 14 millimeter that fits this head here. And then I have some 3-inch exterior decking screws there. I have some 3-inch nails over here. I have my speed square, measuring tape, carpenter's pencil, hammer. So we're pretty much ready to go to start working on the ledger board. So that's the first thing I'm gonna do. I'm gonna grab a 2x10, drag it over here. I'll probably have to use some type of chair or something to brace it up for now because I'm doing this by myself to get it lined up with the house and get it level. And then we're gonna start attaching the ledger board with our lag bolts. And then once we get that done, we can start measuring out our 16-inch on center. That way we can get our joist hangers attached to the ledger. And once we do that, we could actually attach a 2x10 to the joist hanger, bring it out here, and that way I can measure where on my posts is going to be the level point here. So that way we can actually start attaching our post braces and then cut those top of the posts off. So again, if you just follow along, I'll show you how I do it. So let me go ahead and start working on the ledger board and we'll be right back. Okay, so how I typically get started is I'll take my ledger board and I'll prop it up on some chairs or whatever I could do to help me leverage it into place. Then what I do is I leave a gap across the top because that's where my decking boards are gonna lay across the top. And then what I do is I just grab something that's about the thickness of my decking boards, like this, okay? So my level here is pretty close to the thickness of my deck boards. And then I just tuck that in at the top, under the siding there, to give me a good leverage point of keeping this level. So now that I have my first lag bolt in, then I'm going to put my level over here and get it nice and level, lift that into position, throw a lag bolt at the end, and then what I'll do is I'll go back through, measure everything, make sure it's all level, and then I'll go ahead and start measuring out my 16-inch on center joist hangers, and then we'll go back through and put some lag bolts in between each one. Now I do it this way because if you put your lag bolts in first, when you get to the point where you're starting to hang your joist hangers, you might actually have a lag bolt right where a joist hanger needs to be. So I always like to just put a lag bolt at the end and a lag bolt at the end, and then start measuring out where my joist hangers are going to go. And then I'll go back through it and add more lag bolts across the back. So let me keep working on that and we'll be right back. Okay, so when it comes to measuring out my spacing for my joists, I started at the far right end, and then I started with my first joist, and then I just kept measuring over 16 inches and then using my speed square to draw my lines. So again, this doesn't have to be perfect, it's just a guide. So what I do is I start on my last joist marking here. I start at the edge, I come over, mark my 16 inches to the edge, then I take my speed square, draw my first line, and then when I started, I kept my speed square in position with my first line, and then just went down here on these bottom measurements and figured out where did this measurement down here line up for the left side of my joist, and I found it to be right about here at this 75 mark here on my speed square, and then I just slide it over, draw my next line, draw next, and there you go. So as you can see here, I just went ahead and did the same thing every 16 inches all the way down. So this way I know where all of my joists are going to go, and then I could just go ahead and put a lag bolt in between each joist, and then I'll stagger it. So maybe I'll go high between here, and the next one I'll go low, and then high and low, and keep doing the same thing across. So let me keep working on that, and we'll be right back. Okay, so we got the ledger board all attached to the actual house. We got our lag bolts in, staggered all the way across, and we got our joist hangers marked out every 16 inches. Now, I went ahead and put the first joist hanger right here because it doesn't matter where you start. So just make sure when you're hanging your joist hangers, you're leveling them to the bottom of your board. That way, when your 2x10 sits into the pocket, everything should line up even with the top. So the next thing I'm going to do is bring over another joist, and I'm going to put it in the pocket, and then I'll brace it up off the ground over here because my goal is to level the joist and then mark it on my 4x4 post. And then that way I know exactly where to mark my posts for my post joist. So let me keep working on that and we'll be right back. Okay, so I went ahead and I cut my first joist down from 20 foot to 18 foot. Then I sat my joist into the joist hanger over here, and then I leveled it just using an old motorcycle jack and a couple blocks, but I needed to level my joist. And as you see here, we're dead center level, so we're good to go with that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another joist, probably over here or over here, it doesn't matter. I want to do the same thing to the second joist. Then I can actually measure out and level off the markings on my post to where I'm going to attach my 2x10 post joist that's going to connect all four of these posts together. So let me keep working on this and I'll come back and show you what I'm talking about. I'll be right back in a minute. Okay, so just to give you a quick little update of where I am. So I did start getting my post braces put on the front, and I got those level, and then I got a few of the deck joists leveled on top of the post joists. So I'm still working on that. I'm actually putting my rim board on now. I'm going to line it up, that way I can square off the deck. I just got to line it up and get it screwed down to the deck joist right now. Once I get that all level and square, then I can start going ahead, and I'm going to put my second row of post joists in, and then I'm going to start adding the rest of the deck joists. So again, just take it one step at a time, make sure everything is level, and make sure everything is square. Once you do that, you should be good to go. Now just make sure when you're cutting your deck joists that you're cutting them to the correct length. So depending on the length of your deck, you want to subtract out the thickness of your ledger board, which on a 2x10 is about 1.5 inches. And then your rim board, which is again about 1.5 inches. So whatever your total length is, make sure you subtract out the thickness of your rim board and your ledger board from your total length of your joist. That way you could get a nice even cut, and that way everything lines up. And again, if you could get 1 or 2 people to help you, that would make this whole job a lot easier. Again, I'm doing this all by myself, so I have to improvise. I'm using some chairs as some braces. Again, I'm using some floor jacks here to level some of my joists. I have my motorcycle jack over here that I've been using to level everything out. So again, just improvise and use what you got. So far so good. Things are lining up. So again, I just have to work on putting my rim board on, getting everything level and square, and then we can continue on. So I'll be right back in a minute. Okay, well, we have to take a quick little break because we're having a bad thunderstorm rolling in. As you can see over here, it's getting pretty dark out, starting to rain pretty bad, but it shouldn't last that long. So we're just going to take a quick break and we'll be back here in a minute. But I did get pretty much the outside frame done. I got a couple of the joists in the middle done. I got the post joist down here done. And I got one more post joist to do here, and then we'll be done. Then we could just start finish hanging all of our joist hangers, getting our joists installed, and then we'll be pretty much done with the deck frame. So let me keep working on that and we'll be right back. Okay, so we got all of the joist hangers hung up across the back, and we got all the joist hangers hung up here across the front. I got everything leveled, square, and pretty much strapped down for the most part. And then I did go ahead and cut some of the square 4x4 posts off that were hanging up too high all the way across the whole deck. And then at the very end here, since I didn't have much to strap this sideboard to, I took the 4x4 scraps from there, slid it down in each hole, screwed it in, and then I screwed it in from the outside. That way I at least have a couple mounting points on the side holding the side deck in. So at this point, everything's good to go. Now I can go ahead and start cutting the rest of my joists down to size and putting them into position. So let me do that and we'll be right back. Okay, so we got pretty much everything framed out and good to go. We got everything attached. We got our hurricane straps across the front going all the way across there. We got our joist hangers all the way across the front and all the way across the back attached there. I did take some of the scraps that I had from cutting these joists here shorter and cut them into smaller sections and added some blocking in between each joist down this row and then down over that row to help keep the joist from kind of twisting and turning on you. So I got all that done. So pretty much everything's done at this point in terms of framing. So the only thing I still have to do is add some blocking right down through here, because what's going to happen is when I get my deck boards, they're 20 feet long. So they're going to start at that end over there and come down and probably end right here. But what I'm going to do is add some blocking down this center section here. And then that way I could take a few deck boards and then run them the opposite direction going down here as almost a transition strip from this deck to that deck. So I still have to do that. I still have to add a little blocking around my hose bib over here. All I got to do is add some blocking there and some blocking there because I'm going to leave that space open, and you'll see what I'm going to do with that at a later date. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some PEX tubing, which I already have, and I'm going to strap it up under the deck over to there. And then I'm going to take some shark bite fittings and attach the PEX tubing to this hose bib here. And then I'm going to drill a hole and add another hose bib over there. That way in the summer, I'll leave this hose spigot open, and then I'll be able to control the flow of water from the hose bib that I add over there. And then in the wintertime, I could just go ahead, shut that valve off over there, come over here, shut this valve off, disconnect the PEX tubing right here, go in my basement, turn the shutoff valve in there off, and then we'll be good to go. So far, everything's turning out pretty good. Everything's lined up, everything's square, everything's attached, we're good to go. So I have to go place an order for my decking boards, and then once those come in, we'll finish this off. So I'll fast forward to then, and we'll be back here shortly. Okay, just a quick update. So all of my top decking boards showed up, and we started installing them on the deck. Now, after measuring a few things out, I'm probably going to have to make a slight adjustment to my last joist right here. I'm just going to shift it in roughly an inch. That way I don't have to add any additional blocking on the end or custom stripping a small little piece across the top. Everything will just line up this way. But I started getting the decking installed. Over on this side is where I'm going to be adding the transition through here to transition from the old deck to the new deck. So I'm going to have that down there, and I put some blocking down there already, and then I'm just going to go ahead and keep running my boards over. So when trying to figure out how much space that goes in between each board, I would just say find some type of a tool that's going to give you some space. Like I'm using this one here. This little tool here is just enough to where I could slide it in between each board and it gives me enough room for the board to expand and contract. If you don't have a little tool, you can maybe try a carpenter's pencil, but just be aware the carpenter's pencil is a little bit thicker. You could take your speed square here, slide that down into there as well. That'll work. So whatever you decide to use, just make sure you find something that'll work as a spacer, and then put that in between each board as you're lining your boards up, and then screw them all down. Okay, real quick, when you're coming down the line trying to keep your board nice and straight, wood is going to bow a little bit to the left or the right. It's just how wood is. So when you start coming down the line and you start to find that maybe you have too big of a gap or too small of a gap, you're going to want to use some type of a pry bar to kind of pry the board that you're working on away to create the gap you need. Or what I'll do is I'll take an extra piece of 2x4 and screw it to the joist behind the deck board I'm working on. And let's say right here I have too much of a gap. What I'll do is I'll put my little spacer there, and then I'll take my pry bar between the 2x4 and here, and then I'll pry it up and pinch it closer, hold it in position with my leg or my hand, screw it down, and we're good to go, and we keep moving on. So just make sure when you're putting your deck boards on, make sure you have a pry bar and possibly an extra piece of wood to use in case you need to use these tools as leverage to make sure you're lining your board up nice and straight. So I already got this front section here done. All I got to do is keep continuing working back, and then we'll get this wrapped up here very shortly. Okay, so we're all good to go. We got all of our decking boards put on. Everything's lined up pretty good. As I mentioned earlier, I did end up taking this outside 2x10 over here, and I shifted it in about 2 inches just so I can line it up with my 20-foot deck boards. That way I didn't have to worry about ripping any smaller pieces to fit that little gap at the end. And then I just have to get a new saw blade and cut these little edges off that are hanging out past the edge. Cut those off, everything will be lined up. But everything looks real good. Here's what the seam looks like over here. Again, I have it all blocked down the middle, and I have my deck board here running vertically this way. And as you can see here, I'm a little off about 1/4 of an inch or so on a couple boards there. So I might still have to take this board off later and put some shims underneath to raise it up a little bit. But overall, it turned out pretty good. So it transitions real nice from the old deck straight on to the new deck. The next thing I plan to do here in the very near future is probably paint or stain the whole entire deck. That way everything matches. If we come up top and come over here, for now, I just blocked out where my original hose valve was over here, and then I'll eventually just create a little bit of a top cover here. No problem there. But everything's all done. Again, we got some furniture out here. Again, really, really nice over here. And again, it blends in real good with the other deck over here, so we're good to go with that. So yeah, everything turned out real good. Again, there's my hose bib over here that I extended from over there underneath with the PEX tubing over to here. So that works perfect in that location. So at the end of the day, it's not that hard to build your own deck. It just takes a little bit of planning, a little bit of time, and a little bit of hard work and effort. But again, you could do this yourself without always having to pay a professional. Okay, everybody, so we are done. We got the deck all complete and everything looks pretty good. So again, in today's crazy world where everything's inflated, let's face it, we all need to save a little bit of money. So if you happen to have some basic tools and just some basic knowledge of carpentry, I would recommend tackling building a deck yourself. All you have to do is draw up just an idea or a sketch of what you're trying to achieve, or you could go ahead online and buy a set of deck plans if you want. Go buy the wood and try to figure it out yourself. You're gonna save a ton of money and it's definitely worth it. But that's gonna be it for today's video. I hope this video helps some of you out. Do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button and like this video. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments section and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. And also do me a favor, subscribe to the channel because it definitely helps me out and I greatly appreciate it. So that's it. I just wanna say thank you to each and every one of you. Thank you, I truly appreciate you all. And as always, see you in the next video.